Welcome in everyone to GDT Live, and today I'm joined by Terry Doyle. We've had Terry on before, and Terry covers the Sarnia Sting as well as the OHL as a whole. And well, we got the season kicking off here tonight. How are things going in Sarnia?
Well, it's Sarnia Sting have their home opener Friday night. The league kicked off on Thursday night with a couple games, and I think everybody just kind of been ready to go. I know for me, I intentionally stay out of the rink before Labor Day weekend. They have their training camp and maybe even preseason. Summer's too short, so I like to stay out of the rink. But now it's everybody's ready to go and get things on the ice and just see how things are going to play out in the OHL. 68 game regular season and junior hockey. You never know what to expect.
Yeah, you never really do. And especially this year with the whole NCAA change and just the new players coming in, players leaving, of course. But looking at Sarnia, what stands out the most about them heading in for an identity wise heading into 2025-26?
It's the young group moving forward. Alessandro Diorio, Beckham Edwards, two players who played at the Hlinka Gretzky tournament, high picks for Sarnia, now into their second year. And while Diorio will be missing the first part of the season with an injury, looking for them to really take the next step and lead the team. And it's a team looking for consistency and looking to get back into the playoffs. They had the big run a couple of years ago where they went to the Western Final for the first time in their franchise history, lost to the Knights, but then it is a case, of course, that was an expensive rebuild. Porter Martone was among the players. They moved out during that situation. They brought in Ethan Del Mastro. They brought in Luca Del Belbaluz, two players who have now seen time in the National Hockey League. But Martone goes out, young players go out. It's all part of the situation where you go for it. Now we're trying to rebuild. And so the Sting just trying to get back in the playoffs after 2 years on the outside looking in. And I know the fan base in Sarnia, they were quite happy with what happened with the run 2 years ago. Little forgiving with the rebuild to start, knowing what was going to happen. But now they're at that point where, all right, show me now. Show me that things are actually moving forward in the right direction. But with the young group, certainly looking to now show that not using the young group excuse anymore.
Okay. And with a guy like Beckham Edwards, like you kind of touched on him a little bit, he committed to Notre Dame for next season, this past summer, I believe it was. What do you kind of how does his draft stock kind of take a role this year? Does he focus on what's going to happen in the draft, or is he more focused on just what's happening in Sarnia? Because I know some players don't put a lot of thought into their draft stock at all.
I think they say that though. Colton, I think they say they don't put stock in the draft stock because that's the polite thing to say. They know
Yeah.
what's going on. They know what's out there. They'll tell you that I don't look at the rankings and all this. Come on. They're on their phones all the time. They know what's going on. It's their own maturity and professionalism of how they handle it. At the end of the day, we've seen it over the years. We could have two players side by side who, look to be similar, but one helps their team to the third round of the playoffs or a championship, and the other one goes out in the first round. Yeah, you get more looks at that player, and it just shows they can win. And at the end of the day, I think they go hand in hand, where if you can show you can lead a team and put a team on your back and be that key player for them, then it's showing what teams want to see moving on to the next level, versus if you're that guy who goes out and scores 3 goals, but you can't pick up that winger coming back the other way and you end up losing 5-4. Well, yeah, then there's some issues on the other direction. So I think they go hand in hand. Obviously, publicly, it's all about then the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. Come on, in 2025, 2026, these players know what's going on around the other areas as well. And they've also learned to know that a lot of the draft stock and the opinions, it's literally somebody's opinion. And a lot of cases, the opinions that we see out there in terms of rankings, they're not the people actually making the picks. Whether it's NHL Central Scouting, it's a good group of people, but they're not the ones actually making the picks. Or Name Your Publication, they're not making the draft picks either. That's just one person's opinion. The opinions that the players need to be concerned about is the opinions of the St. Louis Blues, the Edmonton Oilers, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Florida Panthers. I won't do all 32 teams, but that's where they're concerned about. But yeah, they know what's going on, but they say, oh yes, I put the draft in the back, I put the draft in the back of my mind. I'm not focused on it. It's there. It's there all season long. But that's where knowing that leading your own team to success and doing the right things that'll be good for your career is also going to help your team.
Absolutely, and it's true. Like I look at the day and age that we live in, where you're always on your phone. And we just had our final preseason game here in Kamloops last weekend, and the Prince George Cougars were in town, and all the scratches sat up beside me in the press box, and they're all on their phones scrolling constantly. Like of course, these kids are all gonna know where they're ranked and where they're gonna go. Of course, hypothetically, but from Beckham Edwards' standpoint, how did he look in the preseason, and what do you kind of make of what he can do this season?
Beckham Edwards' key is going to be as a goal scorer. He's a sniper. He's a guy that puck is on his stick, ends up in the back of the net more often than not. That's going to be his game. What he's going to have to focus and make sure of is he doing the other things right. It's one thing to be a scorer in junior. It's another thing to be a scorer in pro. And that release point and making sure that you're picking those corners where maybe in junior you can get away with something that now you're playing against a top end goaltender in the pro. It's not going to work as well. So it's doing the little things. And he seems to be a guy, from what we've seen so far of him, that's willing to do that. He's not a guy, we remember the old days where that 40 goal scorer was the guy that had to be introduced to his goalie 3 times a year because he would never come back in the defensive zone, but you let him do it because he would score 40 goals. That doesn't happen anymore. And, Edwards can skate. He can do the things and needs to continue, though, working on that. I think is going to be his big thing. He scored some big goals for the Sarnia Sting during his rookie year, had an overtime winner to knock off the London Knights in one of the games. But it is a case now of just continuing to grow his complete game while also continuing to show that he can be a goal scorer. And so far, things seem to be going in the right direction. I've obviously had a chance to talk to him behind the scenes as well, and just seems to have a good head on his shoulders. A player that, pretty strong maturity. I think when he gets a chance to talk to the teams during combine interviews and around prospects events, I think they'll see that he's someone who they can really relate to and have those conversations with. And I think that's really going to help him out as well.
Looking to the defense group for Sarnia, Lucas Fisher is one player that kind of pops out, and if I'm not wrong, he's the son of Yuri Fisher.
He is Yuri Fisher's son, exactly.
Okay. Okay. So that's a good little. I like that. That's a cool little anecdote there. How about Fisher though? Because he's shown some good development so far. What do you kind of make of him for this season?
It's going to be interesting. I think the challenge he's had in Sarnia, especially after the rebuild started, was maybe trying to do too much at times, but maybe had to do too much at times because, you look at his draft year, he was playing top 2 minutes as a 17-year-old, where a lot of times 17-year-old defensemen are not being forced to play top 2 minutes, but that's all he had to work with. And in some cases, maybe trying to also, take up not only playing his game, but maybe fill in for a young teammate or a young defense partner with him as well. And I think that's going to be a factor where knowing what his lane is and playing his game and, wants to mix in a physical game, but picking his spots at times and knowing, okay, here's the opportunity to be physical. Here's the opportunity to win an offense, but then just finding that lane. I think the challenge for him, it's into his 4th season now. And considering the team hasn't made the playoffs the last couple of years, is he getting a little bored, I guess, and wants that new challenge? And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this season goes. He can help lead a team back into the playoffs and, be that captain, be that leader. He is this captain of the Sarnia Sting, but knowing that, be that force out there as a 4th-year defenseman, a drafted player in the National Hockey League, and kind of be that man amongst boys, but knowing how to pick your spots. That means, avoiding maybe some senseless penalties or avoiding, going to the box, offsetting penalties with a 17-year-old that got under your skin a little bit and was trying to get in your face and maybe, or not take that extra 2 or those kinds of situations. But he's shown he can play offensively, but I'm sure this year's camp with the Blues is going to be an important one as well, because that second time through, you're really, first time through camp, you're kind of nervous. Second time, your mentality is a little bit different. I'm sure the Blues want to get him focused on his game as well. I think it's going to be interesting to see him, go through the season in Sarnia. Obviously, as one of the leaders, the captain of the team, the captain of the blue line, but indeed sort of assert himself, but knowing where to really assert himself and where to kind of pick his spots, because we've seen a couple times over his career where maybe take that extra minor that he really didn't need to do, or maybe just let his emotions go a little bit too far. And that extra, he got to the point where he maxed out his fight card in the OHL, where any additional fights, we're going to end up with suspensions, where maybe did he need that to get into that fight with somebody, with a player that was just being annoying, to be honest with you, where, pick your spots a little bit more.
I like that. Pick your spots more, or a little bit more, is something I think a lot of players in junior could hear and need to understand more. Because yeah, there comes a time and place for fighting, and sometimes like even here in Kamloops, I've watched a couple players where it's like you're 18 or 19, and the 17-year-olds getting under your skin, and you take a dumb penalty or you get into a fight, and that's exactly what they want. But that's not what.
Yeah, no, you're right, Colton. That's a case where that's mission accomplished. If you can take out, in some cases, if you're that third, fourth liner and you're taking out their top player for 5 minutes and you're both sitting in the box, that's a win for the other side. And you do see that. And I've seen both sides of that over the years, where a star player goes to the box on an offsetting penalty with a fourth liner. It's just like, no, pick your spots. There's a reason why you're a second round NHL pick, and it doesn't matter Fisher or anybody else. And you're right. I think sometimes there are players that, I think that's where the maturity of the game comes along, as they develop from the late part of junior into pro, and knowing when's the right time for that.
Yeah, you definitely can, like, it's kind of almost stupid to say this, but there's a huge difference between a 19-year-old junior player and a 17-year-old junior player, and you can see that when they're out there on the ice. They've been around the game, they've been there for a few years, et cetera, et cetera. You kind of, like you said, know when to pick your spots. Sometimes they all don't, though, of course. But looking at another defenseman for Sarnia, Caden Aucoin brings size, brings physicality. What can Sting fans kind of get from him?
I think that's exactly it. And you know what? It's that size, physicality. And the one thing we always see is that pedigree. When a player comes in, of course, Adrian Aucoin played in the National Hockey League. When we see the second generations come in, they usually just have that poise about them too, where they just know the game. They know how to handle themselves away from the ice. They know how to handle themselves on the ice. And that's what I'm looking forward to see as we get into the regular season. Just that poise, and knowing usually where to be and just how to handle themselves. You even see it like in warm up, where they know how to warm up. They know how to work out because they've been around the game. They've been in NHL locker rooms and in pro locker rooms and around the game for years, and then seeing that go on. Now, in some cases, we've seen some of these second generation players where the fathers have retired by the time the player has comes along. But even then, through those, sometimes dad's still working in hockey as a scout or player development. They're still around the game. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing and I think that's going to be a big factor for Sarnia as this group grows along together. The Aucoin brothers being around the Sarnia Sting, I think, is going to be a factor, and just helping to, not only for their own game, but just sometimes that can be contagious and it wears off, where you see, 3-4 of your teammates are the first guy in the gym. Well, now 3-4 more guys want to be the first guy in the gym, or want to do that a little extra work at the end of practice, rather than if you've got a group of sort of, I'll call it hockey immature players, not knowing how to do things. And, the one thing for Sarnia right now is Fisher is the only player who's gone to an NHL camp. In terms of, they had a couple players go to like rookie camps, but had that, even more experience at a camp. But then you have that NHL pedigree. It's sort of as if you have that experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like guys like here in Kamloops that like Nathan Bame and Tommy Lafreniere and Harrison Brunick, they're all gone to camps. And it's just like when you come back, you'll be able to see just a little extra step in their game because they've had that experience around the NHL guys. And I think it's so important. And you just alluded to that as well. Going between the pipes, Patrick Quinlan comes up. Obviously was down in the United States playing, and he's part of this whole NCAA switch over. What do you kind of make of him coming over to Sarnia?
I think you kind of wait and see. I think with goaltenders, Quinlan's a guy doesn't, jump off the page by any means, but obviously was doing something right to be part of the national team development program there, and in Plymouth, Michigan, which about an hour and 15 minutes away. So he's not moving very far. coming up the road to Sarnia. But Evan Millette, who has been with the Sarnia Sting last season, was decently rated, played for a junior A team in the Toronto Patriots a couple of years ago that had success. And I think they're both going to fight for the net. And I think it's going to be a healthy fight between the two of them. And, obviously I've had a chance to talk to Millette more than Quinlan so far, and with Millette being here last year, but I know he's a guy that says, you know what, I want the net. And Quinlan's going to say, I want the net. So, Alan Letang, the head coach, the rest of the coaching staff, GM Dylan Sika, I think they found themselves in a good spot right now where they've got two goaltenders who can show that they can play in the Ontario Hockey League. And now it's kind of prove it and then force their hand. Maybe, who knows, down the road, if they both show they can be starters, maybe they find a spot for one of them on another team to help their development, or one of them shows they're the standout number one and the other one, shows that they're capable of being a backup, but that's their ceiling right now. So I think in junior, that's a healthy situation to have. And yeah, it is going to be interesting. Sure, Quinlan comes from the U.S. program, but wait and see. We've seen players come from the U.S. program in the past and, jumped right into junior and did well. And other times, no, it didn't work out. Or players that maybe over the years held back and thought NCAA was their thing. And then at 18 jumped into the OHL and really were middle of the road players. So I think that's the one thing I see, Colton, with the whole OHL, and we're talking Sarnia, but in general with the OHL, it's a lot of show me this year. It's kind of that situation. And I joke that the old days where you'd have that somebody with a loud voice out front selling programs, this would be if they were selling programs, this would be probably a record year for sales, because all the new faces, all the new names around the league, people figuring out who's who and a lot of the changes that have happened. And I think that's where that first 10 to 20 game segment in the OHL is going to probably be the biggest that we've seen in years because of these changes and because of so many different faces and new looks and turnover among a lot of the teams. And I think that's where, kind of excited to see, once again, we say junior hockey is unpredictable. I think even this year, even more.
Yeah, and those programs, that brings me back to being a child. That I remember those and getting those at the Blazers games. And okay,
You can't.
there you go.
That's I got the blur on, so you can't totally see it. A 1990-91 OHL player register they used to put out, where they actually inside there was every player, and looks like it's alphabetical, every player with like their stats and things like that. I grabbed this one. I had it in a collection. I had Dave Branch, just before he retired, I had Dave Branch sign it for me. But those kinds of things that were such a popular thing, the program, the lineups that were in it, now obviously we just get them on our phones, but the old days of program sales, this would be a big year for that.
It's your season, your shot. The NFL season is rolling, and every touchdown can bring you closer to a payout with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. From first touchdown score to anytime TD props or the thrill of the live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. This week on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, you can find lines such as the Minnesota Vikings at -162 to beat the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Dallas Cowboys at -118 against the Chicago Bears. Lines and odds are subject to change. New customers, this one's for you. Bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, grab over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Your season starts now. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you place your first bet of $5 or more. Plus, grab over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Oh, 100%. That's funny that we're talking about this. I just went through a box in my shed the other day, and it was full of hockey cards and programs from like 2002 to 2006 of all these Blazers games. And I just have all these hockey cards and programs and different WHL roster sheets, and it just brought me back.
There's I can't reach it right now, but I can tell you about 8 feet away from me right now, there's a box of stuff there that I know is a bunch of Windsor Spitfire stuff that my office down there, they're doing some clear out. And I said, no, I'm holding on to that stuff. I'll have a chance to go through it. That register is probably where it came out of as well. And then I had Dave Branch sign it just before he was retiring. But those are the fun days. And when you've been around for a little bit and you go to clean stuff out and you're like, I remember having that. Or I remember the old OHL media guides that came out every year as an actual book. Having those around as well. But the young kids now have no idea. They thought programs were only on their phones.
That's so true. Okay. We talked about the OHL as a whole, so let's kind of dive into some players there quickly. Ethan Belchetz, Adam Novotny, Chase Reid, all guys. I mean, Ryan Roobroeck, of course, as well, but all top guys for this year. Who kind of stands out for you among players like that?
I think, start with Belchetz, a guy who
Yeah.
he's that guy that I kind of joke over the years and all the years I've covered the OHL draft. There are certain high end players. I want to check their ID because I don't believe they're 15 and 16. Yes, of course they are, but they come in with that size and that poise. Aaron Ekblad was an example of that. When he came in as a 15-year-old, I remember him walking into the OHL office and, half an hour or whatever it was before we started our broadcast on the Saturday morning. And I see this 15-year-old underager. He got the exceptional status. And I'm looking up like, who is this kid? And I knew it was Ekblad, but still at 15, he looked like a 19-year-old. Belchetz has some of that as well, where he just has that size, 6'4", 6'5", power forward, and battled some injuries last year, but looking to really come into his own this year as well. But on a Windsor team where he doesn't have to be the guy. Liam Greentree's there. Jack
Hmm.
Nesbitt's back after being a first-round pick of the Flyers. AJ Spellicey's back. They've got a bunch of guys on that team so that Belchetz doesn't have to be the guy. And I think that's going to be huge for his development as well, where he'll have that opportunity. Isn't always going to have to play against the top two D pair because the Greentree's going to play against him or a Spellacy, and those guys are going to play against them. So I think that's going to be huge. But I think the potential as a real power forward for Belchetz and, just has that size, has that poise. And, Ryan Roobroeck has that as well. But Roobroeck, of course, this is his third year in the OHL. He's a late birth, so he's
Hmm.
playing that third year. But on an Ice Dogs club that still, they had a good start to last year and kind of got back on their feet after some rough times, but then tailed off starting around February. So I think showing consistency across the board for Roobroeck's going to be key. Does he kind of play a little bit like Porter Martone did last year? And who Martone was, of course, in his third year as well. So I think that's something where I'm very interested to see from that end. Reid on the back end in the Sioux, I think, is going to be an interesting story. Novotny fitting right in Peterborough, right off the bat in their opening game on Thursday. So, yeah, there's obviously going to be a lot of very interesting players around the Ontario Hockey League this season to watch. But, yeah, for me, I think, Belchetz right there, the former number one pick in the OHL priority selection really jumps out as that guy. And it's funny, you do intermission interviews with them. And of course they come over and they're wearing their skates. And, I feel like I need the old milk crate to stand on to get to at least a decent level to them. Thankfully, the microphones are long enough. I can just reach out, but, kind of the running joke. That's why they joke with me. Sometimes says, if I pick the 5'9" player, it said, let me guess, you picked the 5'9" player because you didn't feel like straining your neck. I said, yeah, I try to balance that out a little bit. I'll take the 6'7" Logan Stanley type of guy years ago, or then I'll take the 5'9". But Belchetz or a Jack Nesbitt, some of those guys, when they come over to talk to me, I'm like, would you stop growing? Or I'm getting shorter. But just amazing to think at 17 years old, some of these guys, and so it's very interesting. And of course, scouts are certainly watching to see what they have for those physical tools, and then how they use them as well.
Yeah, of course. And looking outside of prospects, I mean, we've seen a number of players. I mean, the OHL didn't get hit as hard as the WHL did in terms of players leaving to go to the NCAA. But a guy like Jake O'Brien, who is a very hot commodity, signs and returns to go to Brantford. Like, how important is that to the OHL?
Oh, it's huge. A 32 goal guy last year, 98 points. And, certainly a player that knows that his Brantford team is going to be, one of the teams to reckon with around the Ontario Hockey League. So why not be a top guy on a team that's going to go deep? You know the whole situation. And I think that's where it's going to be a huge factor as well. And he signed with Seattle. And I think that's where, there's a lot of talk about who's leaving and who's coming in and things like that. I saw the numbers, 122 new players in the Ontario Hockey League, many, not just players coming out of the OHL draft, but players that are even a little bit older deciding to come to the OHL. So I think it's a huge factor. And you look at a couple that left, Porter Martone played 3 years in the OHL, not 2. So I think that's a big factor as well, where you look at, a player like a Martone, or the ones that were the players that were going to be overagers this coming season and then have jumped out. I think that makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases where, looking to their future and knowing that, okay, high-end pro hockey or the NHL may not be in my future. Yeah, that hits the Canadian university sports system, where maybe in the past those players were going to play minor pro or Canadian university sports, they go NCAA. But yeah, in terms of in the OHL and some of the players that have moved on, Obviously, the Steelheads got hit hard with Martone and Ivan Kovic going the goaltender. But in general, I especially use Martone. He put in 3 years in the OHL. He was a tweener. Let's be honest. He'd be a tweener this year. We're probably, is he maybe not ready for the NHL, but he's good. He's ready to graduate from the OHL level and caught in between. And maybe that rule down the road where 19-year-olds could, one 19-year-old could go to the AHL might work out from that standpoint. But yeah, O'Brien, obviously, you know, when you're first round NHL pick, Jack Nesbitt, as I mentioned, another first round NHL pick, he'll come back to Windsor. Those are going to be huge for the Ontario Hockey League. Liam Greentree should be back from the LA Kings. 49 goals last season, probably would have had 50, but got suspended right at the end. But yet, you know, played one preseason game and had a hat trick there. So I think we're going to see, there's still, you know, a lot of talk, but I think a lot of stars in the Ontario Hockey League still. And then we wait and see in a couple of cases. San Jose, does Michael Misa stick in San Jose? I've got to think Sam Dickinson sticks in San Jose on the blue line. Obviously, bringing up a 19-year-old on the blue line is not necessarily something a team wants to do all the time, but Dickinson doesn't look like a 19-year-old. He looked like a 19-year-old when he was 16, so now he looks about 23. And you saw him at the Memorial Cup where he was logging 40 minutes a night. So I think he's ready to move on. It's just going to be interesting sometimes where a team says, okay, he's ready to move on, but is he ready to play NHL minutes is going to be a factor. But at the end of the day, we're going to still see a lot of stars in the Ontario Hockey League by the time we get through the 68-game regular season and the playoffs.
And that 19-year-old rule, I know that kind of almost became a thing for this season, and then it got retracted, and now it's supposed to be a thing for next year, right?
Yeah, and that sounds like we're going to go in that direction. There was talk, and then it sounds like the new CBA. I think the wording was the NHL will work with the CHL to establish that one player per NHL organization could go to the AHL and all that. That's the lawyers are going to have to figure this part out, but it sounds like it's more than likely to be in place for next year.
Okay. So, and that makes sense because, Sam Dickinson is one guy I specifically look at because I'm like, you're too good to be playing in the OHL. Like, what are you going to do this year if you go back? Like, there's a lot of questions there. So I think he makes San Jose just purely because they don't have anything to lose. First of all, it's like you may as well play the 19-year-old and let him have his minutes because if you continue to play a guy in junior, does that like ruin his development?
I don't think so. I can go
No?
through the years. I can't think off the top of my head. Nobody really jumps off the page. There are players who were, their growth, I think, was stunted staying up in the NHL too early. But I think the other direction we haven't seen, sure, sometimes maybe the player, then he gets moved if his junior team isn't going for it, gets moved to a team so they have something new to go for. But I think more often than not, we've seen coming back to junior has not hurt a player's growth. But now I think the NHL team put a Dickinson, maybe with this new rule in place, they could say, okay, go down to the AHL for 15 games or 20 games. And then in the second half, that little bit more polishing and then come up where, of course, right now, if you send them back to junior, they're there for the season. So I think that's where at least you have that tweener situation where maybe you could send a player down for 10 or 15 games just for that last little bit of seasoning and maybe not rush them in at the start of the year. But I think we've seen so many times over the years, players that have come back to junior have still worked out just fine in the National Hockey League down the road. It hasn't hurt them versus we have seen the opposite direction where a player is brought up at a younger age to play on the fourth line and they never got off the fourth line. And I remember hearing a story from a scout who they had a player in the OHL and he was with the NHL team to start the year and they were sending him down and the GM told the player, we didn't draft you in, let's say, the first 2 rounds. We didn't draft you to be a third or fourth liner. So go back to the OHL, light it up, be a first line guy, and then come back here next fall and show us you can be a top 6-minute guy in our organization. Because right now you're going to be a third or fourth liner. And sometimes there's players we've seen over the years, they come up early, they end up there and they stay in that spot. If you're going to be in the NHL at 18 or 19, you need to be a Steven Stamkos. You need to be a John Tavares. You need to be a player who's going to be a top-end guy and continue to be a top-end guy. Michael Misa, I'm assuming if he's going to stay in San Jose, he's playing top 6 minutes. The only thing that can harm the team, of course, is it starts the contract situation right away versus letting the contract slide for another year. And, you have to get that second contract earlier. Free agency clock starts earlier. But I think Dickinson's a classic example where he would be one that I'll be surprised if he doesn't play a lot of NHL minutes this season.
Absolutely. Looking at the OHL as a whole, some teams to watch. Obviously, Brantford and Windsor. How does London kind of stack up this year?
You know what? London's going to be interesting with a lot of turnover from last season, and of course the run they've had over the last few years, and winning back-to-back titles. But you just never know with the Knights. Sam O'Reilly, of course, a high pick, was drafted by Edmonton, moves to Tampa. His NHL rights. He now gets set to move up to take some big minutes on for the London Knights. Logan Howry, their first-round pick from a couple of years ago, now he's poised to be taking on more minutes. And the London factory just seems to keep moving players right through. Alexei Medvedev in goal was the backup last year to Austin Elliott. Now, after being drafted in the NHL, looks to carry the mail there for the Knights, and they always seem to make things happen. Do I expect them to be kind of that head and shoulders above everybody else group this season? No, but do I expect them to be in the mix? Absolutely. But I think you also look at Kitchener. I think Niagara has an opportunity to make some noise as well. I think it makes things very interesting, but of course, all eyes are going to be on downtown London because, the New York Yankees of the Ontario Hockey League, as a former GM coach in the OHL referred to them at one point, which is not a bad thing to have, where you have rivals. You look at half the league could be a rival of the London Knights, and makes for exciting times and exciting games. And, sports, it's you cheer for your team, but you kind of want to have an enemy somewhere as well. And you see that, it's like in the NHL. If you're a Canadian NHL fan, you cheer for your team and you cheer against the Leafs, unless you're a Leaf fan. And if you're a Leaf fan, you cheer against Montreal or you cheer against Ottawa. It's, it's healthy in sports. Or, you take a Philadelphia Flyers fan, they hate everyone else. So it all kind of has fun, in sports. So, but yeah, the Knights, a lot of turnover, of course, the Cowans, the Barkeys, and all those names. And then we wait and see with a Dickinson, for example. But yeah, I think the Knights, Mark Hunter is always pounding the pavement. Dale Hunter, of course, he adjusts his system based on the players he has, where a lot of coaches over the years, they have a system, find me players to fit my system. Dale, if he's got the snipers, he'll play run and gun. If he doesn't, he'll play trap it up, off the glass and out, simple hockey. Dale has always adjusted his game and his team's game based on what he has, and then makes those adjustments and sits there. People think Dale Hunter's an old school guy. He's in video. He's been he's got his nose in the video constantly, and he's there first thing in the morning every day, his nose in the video, looking at stuff, and then adjusts, makes those adjustments based on what his players can do and gets the best out of his players. And so many teams obviously are good at that in the OHL across the board. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're still going to hear from the Knights in one form or another when it comes to being a factor, whether or not at the top of the list, but certainly in the middle of things by the time we get through this season.
Okay, I have a couple quick hitters for you as we kind of wrap things up. I took these off of the OHL's media site, as I saw these were questions that were presented to the media. So I don't know if you already have answered these and voted on these, but number one, who will be the league's top rookie?
Top rookie. That's one that I think is going to be very interesting. Caden McGregor, the first overall pick of the Peterborough Petes, is certainly a player that, it wasn't a year where you had that head and shoulders first overall player, but he's going to get an opportunity in Peterborough. So I think it's someone to certainly keep watch for. The one interesting thing, of course, is to be a rookie of the year in the OHL, you have to be a 16 or a 17-year-old. So maybe park that a little bit, where in the past we saw 18 and 19-year-olds win Rookie of the Year. So you can't do that. So, I think McGregor is going to be very interesting as that first overall pick. When you're the first overall pick, you always have eyes on you. So, let's go in that direction.
Who will be the league's top prospect at the NHL Draft? Will it be Belchetz?
I think so. I just think that what Belchetz brings to that whole game, and just that size and, size, able to score, I think as we go through the year, I would stay right there at the top of the list.
I know you probably have to say Sarnia for this answer, but who's going to win the OHL Cup?
I can't say that. I don't have to say that. I can say whoever I want. So in this case, you know what? I know it's the easy one, but right now, Brantford. Yeah. Brantford so I'll stay black and gold. There we go. Right? So I'll say black and gold. Yes. But the Brantford Bulldogs just seem to have so much to their club right now from the net on out, and just seem to be a very strong club. And their friendly confines in Brantford, well, at the Civic Center, good home ice advantage. So yeah, it's the easy one. It's kind of what a lot of people are saying. But Windsor is going to make a lot of noise this season as well, with so many players back. Windsor, Brantford, Bulldogs Spitfires final, which we had a few years ago as well. They were in Hamilton at the time, but it wouldn't shock me to see those two teams in the final again.
Oh, that would be awesome. My last one, Terry. What is your favorite OHL jersey? It can, and we'll do present, like right now.
Okay, so here's where I have a tough time with this one. To me, it's the classic Peterborough Pete's look. I'm from Peterborough, so I'm biased. Hand up, totally biased. Hometown team. It's when the Petes have messed with it. I never liked it. And I've told them about this. They've got a black third jersey. No, they are the maroon and white. They had cream jerseys at one point. No, you are the maroon and white. It's like Toronto is the blue and white. You are the maroon and white. Stick to that. I love the classic look of the Peterborough Petes. That would be, for me, the favorite jersey.
Perfect. Awesome answer. And honestly, like when Peterborough came here for the Memorial Cup, I was blown away by their jersey, just how simple and clean it was.
And that's exactly it. Don't mess with it. You've got that clean, simple look. Oh, they had a stretch there where they were messing with it. And yeah, I said they had a cream instead of the white and all this. Like, no, maroon and white. That is your brand. That is your color. Yeah, they're having fun with the black third jersey. I don't like it, but you know what? I'm not the one buying jerseys.
That's fair. That's fair. Hey, Terry, thanks so much for joining me today. It was awesome to go over Sarnia and the OHL with you.
Hey, anytime.
What's going on, everyone? Thank you for tuning into another video over here on the Game Day Tarps podcast and the Hockey Podcast Network. We've got so much more where this came from, so smash the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell, turn the notifications on so you never miss a beat. For myself and the rest of the guys over at Game Day Tarps, we thank you, and we'll see you next time. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for tuning into another video over here on the Game Day Tarps podcast and the Hockey Podcast Network. We've got so much more where this came from, so smash the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell, turn the notifications on so you never miss a beat. For myself and the rest of the guys over at Game Day Tarps, we thank you, and we'll see you next time.